Sure. Let me try and share my screen.
Yeah, I'll give you host.
That'd be great.
All right. Go ahead.
All right. Can everyone see? Yeah. I'll take that as a yes. Someone say if you can't see. Okay, cool. Thanks. Thanks, guys. All right. Well, hey, guys. I'm Ellis. Let me get that out of the way. Ooh. I'm Ellis. I'm going to be talking to y'all about React, but more specifically, hooks in React. I should preface this by saying I'm going to assume like relatively basic knowledge of HTML and CSS and some JavaScript. If you don't feel like super comfortable with any of those, that's completely okay. The structure of this is going to be, I'm going to give you guys some slides, and then we are going to, in order to give you guys some confidence in building your own programs and websites, we're going to make something from complete scratch. So I will be doing that along with you guys. So if you don't completely understand HTML or CSS or whatever, that's fine. You can still definitely get something out of this. So I should preface this by saying, ooh, I gotta let people in the waiting room, don't I? Okay, I should preface this by saying I'm going to be using Node.js in order to actually run the code. It's kind of my fault that we didn't tell you guys to get this beforehand. I'm assuming some of you have it. If you don't, that's okay. Since it's kind of my fault, I'm gonna install it with you guys. So can we send this link in the Zoom chat? Ooh. If I can find it. Okay, please hold. It's running from me. Okay, well, it's this. This is the link. Just look up node.js and then download. I'll install this with you guys. I feel bad we didn't tell you beforehand. So you're here. You're at the download page. Just pick whichever is your OS. If you're a Mac kind of person, this is where you go. If you're a Windows kind of person, this, whatever. So you just press that. You open it. Okay, well, normally you just open it. And then you kind of just click through its little instructions. So it'll look like this, the little setup wizard. Can you guys say in chat if you already have Node or if you're like trying to install it right now? Oh, thank you, Serena. Just install it. Awesome. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. And you're probably gonna, if you have, I mean, I would recommend doing this in VS Code. You can do it in like IntelliJ or whatever, any IDE works, but you'll probably need to like close out and start up your IDE again for it to work. But I think it seems like people are getting it. Awesome. Yeah, y'all the best. Y'all have some time too, because I want to go through some slides. Okay, and for everyone that has Node installed, before I get too deep into the slides, I want to initialize this project because depending on your computer, it can take a little bit. That's not VS Code, that's Discord. Here. So we got a brand new VS Code window right here. You're going to want to make a directory or wherever directory you like to put things. I'm going to make a new one. Just find somewhere for it. You can call it whatever you want, workshop, React, whatever. That doesn't exist. I got to make that, don't I? Okay. So once you're kind of wherever you want to put all of this stuff, I want you to right click anywhere in the directory. Also, if I ever go too quick, let me know. I don't mind slowing down. So you'll right click in the directory and you go to open an integrated terminal. So you just want to make sure that you are in the right directory. Okay, cool. You just want to make sure you're in the right directory. You can press PWD if you want to check. And we're going to type npx create dash react dash app and then space and then whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to call it Tic Tac Toe.
There's a question in the chat. How do I make a directory?
How do you make a directory? Okay, here, I can do this again. So what you do is you right click wherever, like on the file explorer area of what's it called, VS Code. You can make a new folder that way, or when you make it, here, I'll show you when you make a new window, because this is probably what you guys will see. You'll see, like, if you go here in Explorer, you'll see open folder, clone repository, whatever. If you press open folder and then go wherever you like to put things, wherever you know you can find it, or if you don't want to find it, that's cool too. You can just put it in like the depths of your downloads folder or something. Find somewhere nice for it where you know you can find it. And then you just right click in the file explorer, just press new and then folder. It doesn't have to be a new folder. I mean, it can be a folder that already exists. It's just somewhere to put all this stuff. If you're on Mac, I have very little experience with Mac, but I can't imagine it's that different of a process. And if you can't figure out how to make a new one, you can just find one that you don't mind putting it in. Okay, so was anybody able to do npx create react app Tic Tac Toe? Was anyone able to do that successfully? Yes, it's working now. Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, it takes a little bit. That's why I wanted to have you guys do it early, because if your machine's kind of old, or actually even on new machines too, if you don't have like Yarn or something, it can take a long time. So, okay, well, this is what you guys type in whenever you're ready. I'm gonna keep moving on with the slides. Here, I can put that in the chat or something. I can figure out how to find the chat. Yeah, there we go. That's what you put in your in the terminal. Okay. So I'm going to do that. Press enter. It'll start doing a whole bunch of funny stuff, and we can just let that go while I present the slides, because it'll take a little bit. Okay. So that's Node. All right, cool. So what actually is React? You know, we've spent this time talking about installing Node or whatever, but what is React? Well, I'm sure some people have experience with React in here, especially if you've done like much JavaScript. It's just a JavaScript library, and it's really useful for building user interfaces. And if you're familiar with like the model view controller, like design pattern, it's like almost completely responsible for the view layer. If that doesn't make sense, it's okay. But we're talking about React hooks. So what are React hooks? Well, they're a pretty new addition to React. Essentially what they do is they let you use a lot of what React has to offer without making all these complicated classes. Previously, to do some of the things that these hooks are doing, you'd have to like make a whole bunch of classes, then reference a whole bunch of stuff. Now it's really, really easy. You can also build your own hooks, but we're only going to be talking about the two most common hooks because the principles kind of apply to every hook. So hooks, you can only use inside of function components like this. Like you couldn't put a hook outside. You have to put it inside a function component. And so we can talk about the most common and probably the most important hook, which is called useState. We can see it right here. So useState is, oh, we got some errors. npx create react Tic Tac Toe. I think that's an error that comes up when there is an issue with Node, like with your installation of Node. I don't know what to tell you except for try reinstalling it. But this whole lecture, I call it a lecture. Wow, I take myself too seriously. This whole workshop is it's going to be recorded. It is being recorded. It'll be on YouTube. So if you can't figure it out now, that's completely okay. Okay, so let's talk about useState. UseState is the most common and probably the most important of hooks. Essentially, if you ever have information in a website that you want to hold on to, and you always want to know that information, that's when you use state. So previously, if you wanted to have a piece of information that would carry between renders of the website, you'd have to do a whole lot of fancy stuff. But now you can just declare a state variable using useState, and that information will hold between any render of the website. So for arguments, it just takes the initial value of whatever state you're declaring. And if any of this is confusing, we're going to actually be coding it in a little bit, so it'll make much more sense then. So we're saying current state, because this returns your current state value, and it returns a function that updates that current state value. So what this is saying here is we're saying, okay, we have a current state little variable guy, and it will hold its value through every single render of our website. This update little variable guy, this is specifying a function, and this is the only thing that's allowed to change what's in current state. Okay. And then we have useState here, and useState just takes in whatever the initial value is. So if we go back a slide, that's the wrong slide. Go back a slide. Yeah. This is a little like counter, right? So we're declaring a count state variable. So that's going to hold its value. Then we have set count, which is the only thing that's allowed to change what's in count. And then we have useState. And so the initial value of useState is 0. Or not of useState, sorry, of count is 0. Then we have some simple HTML here, just a divider, a paragraph, and saying you clicked count amount of times, and it'll hold that value between renders. And then there's a button that every time you click it, it calls set count, which is the only thing that's allowed to change count, and it just adds 1 to what count was. So I worked on this like 10 minutes, but this specific slide, 10 minutes before our little workshop. I thought it'd be helpful. So this is a little boy trying to hold his information. He's the variable. A little boy trying to hold his information without using useState. If this little gray thing is like a re-render. Is he going to hold it? No, he's sad. He couldn't hold it anymore. He doesn't know what it is. But if we are using useState, where's the little boy? There he is. He's got a 3. And he still knows it's a 3. So that's the power of useState. Okay, use effect. That's probably the second most common, maybe second most important. Essentially, use effect, all that you give it is a function that you want to execute every single time there has been a change in something you specify. So in this example, it doesn't specify anything. So anytime the website gets a change, it'll execute this. So we have our count, set count, useState, initial value is 0. And all this is doing is calling the browser API and just changing the title to say you clicked however many times you've clicked. But this is use effect. So every single time you click, use effect will trigger, and then it will change the title of the thing. Right? So we're going to be making a little Tic Tac Toe. We're going to do it from scratch. Depending on how much time we have, I might end up giving you guys like the style sheets maybe, because it's kind of boring. But we're going to do all the React stuff ourselves so you guys can learn it. So I hope by now, if you are following along, if you still need to figure things out and you're going to watch the video later, that's fine. I hope by now this should be done. Mine might look a little bit different because I have yarn. If you guys don't, that's okay. So before we do what we're about to do, we want to make sure we are in the right directory. You always want to do that if you're working in the terminal. Or yeah, so we do so whatever you named your directory, I named it Tic Tac Toe. We're going to do CD for change directory, Tic Tac Toe. PWD to check we're in the right directory. We are. That's great. So now we just type npm. npm is Node's like default package manager. If you don't know what that means, that's okay. But just for those that are curious, just npm and start. And you just give it a second. I'll let y'all do that. And you see, it'll take you to your browser. Don't worry, it's not like an ad pop-up or something. That's purposeful. It'll give you this. This is a default React app, right? And we can see, now that we just ran all that funky little stuff, we actually have a whole bunch of code here now. That's what's making this happen. All right. So we can kind of get started now. I am going to delete some of the stuff I know we're not going to use because it's not what was the command, Andrew? For which part? npm start. Yeah, thank you, Elena. Okay, well, so just for make things nice and neat, I know we're not going to be using some of these things, and I like to get rid of them if I'm not going to use them. So we're going to get rid of app.test.js. We don't need that. If you don't get rid of them, it should still work, honestly, but I like to get rid of it. We don't need the style sheet for index, so we can get rid of index.css. And we're going to get rid of logo. That was the spinny picture. Also, it's going to say failed to compile. That's fine. That just means it's looking for things that we just deleted. So we can press logo, delete that. And then we want to delete, I think it's setup tests. Yeah, we don't need that. Right. Just a little bit more housekeeping. In index.js, there is this import statement to index.css, which doesn't exist anymore. You can go ahead and get rid of that. Make sure to save all your things too, Control S. All right, then app.js is importing the logo picture that we deleted. So we can get rid of that. And now this kind of comes in default. All this stuff right here, we don't need it. Anything that's in this header, you can just go ahead and get rid of. We don't need that. We can do it ourselves. All right, so if you save this now and you give the browser a second, it should just be white. That's good. We want that. Sometimes it'll flash big red letters at you and stuff, and it's kind of scary. Just refresh it. Normally, that just happens when it's trying to render like in between you saving things and stuff. If you refresh it more often than not, it'll just go back to being normal. Okay, well, now we can actually start thinking about Tic Tac Toe. So when you're starting a project from scratch, it can be kind of scary sometimes because you're like, oh crap, well, where do I even start? Well, let's just break it down and let's just do it one piece at a time. Tic Tac Toe, luckily, is not a particularly complicated game, so it shouldn't take a crazy amount of time. But obviously, larger projects can seem even scarier. That's okay, just one little piece at a time. So let's think. How do we want to represent what is in this like tic tac toe board, right? Because we're always going to need to know the values, like if it's X, if it's O, if it's nothing. So how should we represent this? And also, how do we keep this information between all of our renders? Because we're always going to want to know what the board is looking like, right? So can anybody tell me what hook likes to keep information between renders? I had a nice little graphic for it. Okay, I bet you guys were thinking the right answer. Ustate, there you go, awesome. Ustate, so we want to use ustate here. To use ustate, we do have to import it, right? So you want to say import, little braces, ustate, right? From React, just like that. Cool, so we can use ustate now. So let's use it. We got to make sure to use it inside the function component because can't use it outside. Just the rules. We're going to say constant. And then this is our state variable. So let's just call it board, right? I think that's fair. And this is our function that is the only thing that's allowed to modify board. So let's just call it, I don't know, set board, right? So it's all equals ustate. Okay, well, what's the initial value of our board? This is kind of where we have to decide how we want to represent this information. Right? Because board doesn't actually have it's just a variable. It doesn't have a type. In JavaScript, you don't have to only specify the type like in other languages. So we have to decide now how we want to represent this information. I think the easiest way, since it's only 9 squares, is just using an array, right? That seems fair enough. And it's just like any other array in any other language. We're going to have 9. Array of length 9, so indexes 0 to 8, right? And they're all going to start out without any value, right? But it's going to be getting string values at some point. So we're just going to put 9 empty strings. If you have to count like manually, I will give you guys time because I'm probably going to have to do that too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Perfect. Okay, cool. We now have an array to represent our board, and we have this information always carried throughout every single render, right? All right. Well, okay, that's cool. We have the information, but it needs to look like something, right? Like just because the information is here somewhere in the void doesn't mean we can see it. So in our big app divider, let's press enter. We're going to make a new divider. We're going to style this divider to look like the board, I guess, right? So we're going to say div. This is that basic HTML I was talking about. If you're present for the last workshop, I'm pretty sure they talked about dividers. Div, the class name of this divider, we're going to make it board. Right? Fair enough. Okay, we have a board and we can't see it yet, but we have a board. But how do we want to like actually represent these squares, right? Well, this board is only 3 rows. And if we just put 3 squares in each of the rows, we have all 9 of our squares. So we're going to make another divider here. Class name, we're going to call it row. Right? So that's going to be one of the rows. And because it's in the board, we're going to need 3 of them because there's 3 rows, right? If anybody has any, if I'm losing anybody, just let me know. Also, if you guys want, I can give you guys the repository for the finished code. I can do that at the end or even in the middle if you guys feel like you're, you can't keep up or something. I know I have to try and get through it fast. I want to make sure I don't waste your guys' time and go over. Okay, so we have boards, we have rows, but okay, like it doesn't look like anything, right? Okay, well, we want to style it. So we're going to go over to our wonderful app.css. Oh, what is all this? This is just from that sample app when we initialized everything. We can literally get rid of all of it. We don't need it. All right. Okay, so let's get styling. let's get styling. All right. So .app, that's talking about our app class. And if this part doesn't make sense, I can literally just give you guys the whole style sheet if that helps, but it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just kind of a lot to type. So app, I'm going to give it width of 100 VW. Give it a height of 100 VH. Display, it's going to be flex. I'll explain all this in a second. Justify content, center, and align items, and we center. Okay, so for the app class, just take my word for these. These little descriptor things will make more sense for the other classes. So that's cool. All we did was just kind of set proportions of the whole viewport, right? With app. That's all this is doing. It's nothing crazy. But over here we have our board divider, and we need that to look like something, right? Like it doesn't look like anything. So let's style it. Let's do it with CSS. Press dot board. Now we're styling the board. Well, how big do we want to make it? Well, it's a square, so we got to make sure width and height are the same, but we can go like width, I don't know, let's like 500 pixels, maybe. Height, 500 pixels. Okay, what color do we want it to be? What color do we want our VH and VW? That's just, when talking about like the entire viewport, that's giving height and width in terms of like a percentage. I can go over more of the CSS like at the end if we have time for it. But it's nothing like crazy complicated. It's just talking about it in a percentage rather than like specifying just pixels or something. Okay, so what color do we want our Tic Tac Toe board to be? Someone can like say a color in the chat, and we can do that. Blue. Okay, blue sounds good. Carolina blue. Oh, true. I don't know the hex code for that, but we can do a light blue. Okay, so it's just background color. So what kind of blues we got? Like light blue? That kind of Carolina blue? I guess we'll find out. Let's give our board a border. let's give our board a border. 1 pixel, solid, black. Fair enough. Make a display. I want to make this flex. And that's going to make sense once we start styling the rows and the squares. And the flex direction is going to be column. All right. So now we save this. This is actually going to look like something now. Ready? Control S. Boom. Nice little square. This square is just a representation of our board divider. Right? Cool. Now we're going to style these rows. So dot row. This one's going to be easier. So we have a display of flex. We know that there are we know that there are 3 squares in our row. So we have flex. So we're going to say for row, flex 33% of the board, right? There's going to be 3 of them. This is also a display of flex. That's going to be for the squares. And this is flex direction of row. Okay, cool. So we're done with CSS for a little bit. We have, oh yeah, we can't see the rows right now because we don't actually have anything like, we don't have a border on them. If you want to prove to yourself that they're there, you can say border 1 pixel, solid, black. There they are, but we're not gonna have a border. We're gonna put the border on the squares instead. It's gonna look nicer. Okay, cool. So that's great. We got a board. We got rows, like in little invisible rows. Let's start making some squares. You don't have to put this, you don't have to structure everything the same way I am. If you want to, that's great. I'm gonna make a new folder and I'm gonna call it components. I like to keep my components in a separate little directory. Right? So components. In components, I'm gonna make a new file called square.js. There you go. So now we have our new component. Well, we're gonna want to use React in here. So we're gonna import React from React. Enough. There's imports. We want to import the style from our app style sheet, right? Because we want this squares to look like something. So import ... to go back a directory, app.css. Great. Well, let's make our square. We'll write our square as a function. Say square. And we're going to have it take in 2 arguments every single time you declare a square. I'm going to give it a value. And we're going to give it a choose square function, right? So the choose square function is what we're going to be using to actually change the value within the square. So some very simple HTML here, just return and then parentheses. And we're going to make our divider so that we can actually style these squares equal square. Close that divider. And then so we have that divider, it's great. And then all that this is going to do is just display the value that we give it, specified in this argument. Oh, also, we should make this a clickable object. So I think they showed this in the other workshop too. You can do in the tag, you can say on click like that. And then whatever's in here is what it has to do on click. And we're making it we're making whoever is creating a square give us a function anyway. So let's use that function. Choose square. So every time we click it, it's going to do whatever function we give it, essentially, right? That's great. One last thing, it's super easy to forget. I forget all the time. If you actually want to use this, we have to export it. It's not like that in a lot of languages, so it can kind of trip you up. But you export default square. That's our entire square. That's all we want to do for our squares, right? Okay, cool. Well, let's make it look like something. So we have these squares. They don't exist anywhere yet. They're just in here, but we're going to use them in a second. So we'll go to app.css, .row. Now we want to do .square. All right. And I feel bad making people just type out all this CSS. but it's pretty simple CSS as well. It's also going to be a flex of 33% because, like we said, it takes up a third of the row. There's going to be 3 of them. Height, we're going to make that 100% of the row, so they're nice and flush. We probably want to give these a border. We can actually see them. 1 pixel, solid, black. We want to make it every time this, I mean, this isn't necessary, right? But every time we hover over, I like to have the little cursor change so you know it's clickable. So you can say cursor, pointer. It's nice little CSS trick. Not really a trick, but it looks a lot nicer for clickable objects. I'll say that. All right, so display, and make that grid. I'm going to place these items in the center. That's for the value. Font size can be whatever we want it to be. I'm gonna say like 130 pixels or something big. Doesn't really matter. You can make it whatever you want as long as you can see it. The color, we can just make that black. That's the color of the text. And font family, this doesn't really matter. I'm just gonna say like Arial or something. Yeah, Arial, that's fine. Great. So that's our CSS for the square. Cool. Okay, well, we have our square styled. We have our squares created. So let's put them in. Well, we have these rows, and every row is going to have 3 squares. So why don't we just go ahead and make our squares? So we know that when we create our squares, in order to make a new square, we have to give it a value. We have to give it a function, choose square, so it can do that function whenever it gets clicked on. So let's make this square. This isn't a tag, so square. Let's make the value of this square. We're going to say this is the first square. So it'll be the board at the first index. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Because the squares are going to line up with each of these little indexes. And whenever this gets changed, then so will the value, right? Okay, cool. So board at index 0, like we just said. That's great, but now we have to give it a function. Choose square. So what function do we want to give it? Well, we're going to have to define a better function later, and you guys don't have to type this if you don't want to waste your time. Just to prove that it's working, sometimes I like to make a little alert guy like that. Say alert 0 because it's the 0th square, and then close your square. So now, because if we make 3 of these, right? Ready for this? Oh yeah, that happens. I gotta import it. It's really easy to forget what you're importing and exporting. Okay. Import square from ./components/square, and you would put there whatever the relative file path to your square is. Save that. There you go. Look, we have 3 beautiful squares, and look, they're all clickable. When you click it, it does alert. That's the function we gave it, right? And when we hover over, our cursor shows us that it's clickable. It's great. Also, another little, I mean, this is completely unnecessary, but I think it's kind of fun. If I like to do, I think it's square, I think it's active. Yeah, it's square active. Okay. .square. You don't need to do this if you don't want. Active, and then give it a different color. Let's make it like dark blue or something. Oh, wait, background color. Yeah. So look, now every time we click it, it changes color. Isn't that kind of cool? Okay. All right, back to Tic Tac Toe. Okay, cool. Well, we have our squares. So let's think. We have our board, we have our rows, we have our squares. We have our squares set up and ready to do a certain function, which would be the function to change its value. But we don't actually have that function. But also, how are we going to know what value to change this, change that square actually into, right? Well, it's whoever the player is, right? So there's X's and there's O's. So that's another piece of information we're probably going to want to hold on to throughout every single render. And what lovely little React hook have we been talking about that holds information between every render? if you thought use state, you thought correctly. We're going to do another one of these. Constant. And we're going to say player, because we're always going to want to know who the player is. The player. To modify the player, we can just say set player, whatever. And then we're going to say use state. And what's the initial value? Because that's the only argument. What's the initial value of player? Well, most Tic Tac Toe games, I think, start with X. You could do whatever you want. I mean, it could be like P or something, or Q, I don't know. But I want to do X because that's kind of traditional. It's what I think it's normally X and then O. So, okay, that's great and all. But how are we going to actually like, now we have to assign that to squares, and then we have to change it after whatever. So how are we going to do that? Okay. Well, we're going to need to make a function to give to choose square so that it can change its value, right? We can make a function and just pass that in, and rather than defining the function within the argument. So that's what we're going to do. Say constant choose square. Well, I mean, I'm going to call it choose square. You guys can call it whatever you want, I guess. And it's going to take one argument. I'm going to call that square. So that's going to be the number of the square that it is. Right. So I'm not going to, I think if you're familiar with JavaScript or you're familiar with, yeah, if you're familiar with JavaScript programming, I'm sure you know what a map function is. In the interest of time, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. I'll briefly explain it, but you could, I mean, I could do like an entire workshop on like the importance of like the map function or whatever. So we're going to want to change our board here, right? We're going to change the values in the board. So let's say set board, right? And what do we want to set it to? Well, okay, this logic might seem scary. I promise it's not. So what do we want to set board to? Okay, well, we're going to call a map function. Since board is an array, we're going to call map on it, right? And what do we want while we're inside the map? So what map does is it'll go through our board array, and it'll do something that we specify to every index, right? So, well, we want the value and we want the index, right? Cool. Well, so now we're going through every index, whatever. We need to change the value of the square at the specified index because it's that specific square, right? And index is I by convention. It's a very simple logic. If I is square and value is nothing, which means if we're at the right index, I is square, and the square has not been assigned a value yet, what we're going to do is whoever the player is, that's who'll get to, they'll put their mark on the square, return player, right? So like if the player is an X, it'll return an X and put that on the square. And the only other option here, not that. The only other option here is if we're not in the right place, in that case, we'll just return value and nothing will change. It'll return what it already was. All right, cool. I get the feeling that people probably aren't following along. I mean, I think not following along coding with me, I mean. I get it. Time is a constraint. This is going to be posted. It's all going to be recorded and posted if you want to follow along then. I'm also going to post a public repository of this code at the end when I give you guys the feedback little document thing. But I think there's still something to be gained from watching this unfold and seeing where the problems arise that hooks can fix. All right. Okay, cool. So we got our choose square function now. It's great. Well, we didn't actually want to alert here in the first place, right? Like this is where we want to update the square's value. That's the whole reason we are forcing whoever is making the square to, put in a function as choose square. So what we're going to do is we are just going to call choose square, right? Like we made it. Let's use it. So choose square. And then we're going to put the index of whatever square we are. So in this case, choose square 0. And in this one, it would be choose square of 1. This index would be 1 because it's square number 1. This is square number 0. This is square number 2. So choose square at 2. All right. Choose square at 2. Wonderful. Oh. See, these are the scary red letters I was talking about. Okay. Oh, I'm missing a brace, I believe. Am I? Hold on. I'm gonna rewrite this. I'm gonna write this square just to make sure something. Okay. That's the problem with coding live. Sometimes you run into errors that you cannot account for. So board choose square equals no argument. Oh, we weren't specifying that there was no argument. Okay, that was the problem. Choose square at 0. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this and do this to all of the rows. Oh, we didn't close it, did we? Okay, cool. I'm going to add these to every row. Refresh this and save this so this isn't breaking anymore. It's just 3 in that one. It's going to be 3 in this one. 3 in this one. Just got to go through and change the indexes. I hope people are able to follow. I know code alongs can get kind of drag. I'm trying my best to keep you all engaged. I think it's very fun to do this kind of stuff, and I think that helps. But whatever you can get out of it to learn a little bit. Come out knowing more than you came in. Okay, so look, we have all our squares now. Ta-da! And it's properly setting the value of the square. It's just going to set it to x every time, though. See? Because we're not switching the player. Right? So we want to switch the player. Well, how are we going to switch the player? How are we going to do that? So every time, when do you switch player? You switch player after you place like a tile, right? It's like X places a tile and then it would switch to 0. Well, we talked about a hook earlier that it executes every single time there's a change in what you specify, right? And I'll save you all the time. The hook I am talking about is our lovely use effect, right? Use effect, it takes a function as an argument, and it does that every single time there's a change in whatever you specify. So we're going to do some simple logic. If the player is X, we're just going to make the player O. Right? And the only other option is your O, so then we'll just make the player X. We have to use set player because player can only be modified by set player. There you go. And then you have to put down here, comma, in square brackets, board, and that's how you specify every time there's a change in the board. So we'll save this. Now we should be switching player, right? Okay, switching player, but it is the wrong order. And I don't know if you guys recall, but I said in the slides, use effect also triggers on the first render. So if we're starting out on X and then use effect happens, and it happens on the first render, then we're going to go straight to 0, right? It's not a very elegant solution, but we can just change X to 0. That's one way to fix it. But you can see how that could cause issues if you're not aware of it, right? Use effect will always happen on the first render as well as every render or every change happens in whatever you specify. But it always happens on the first render. So that's what was making our X's O's. Great. Well, we have a board, we have rows, we have squares. We have squares that are properly taking a value. We have a player. We have the player that's switching. I mean, this is almost fully functional tic-tac-toe, right? But what do we still have to win the game, right? Like we can draw X's and O's on here as much as we want, but nobody's winning. Like, if you get a win right here, nothing happens. So now we got to decide how we want to find the winner and how we want to track the winner. Well, first of all, the result of the game, I feel like, is something we're going to always want to know between every render, right? Because if the result of the game is a one game, then you'd stop it and you'd reset it. So we're going to use another use state. You can see how handy these things come whenever there's a piece of information you want to hold between every render. So we can call the state variable result, set result equals use state. And if you're unfamiliar with JavaScript, this is probably going to look a little bit foreign. Make a little object with the different fields of winner. I'm going to set that by default to nobody. And we're going to make another field. We're going to call it like state. And this will just be like one or tied or something like that, right? So it's going to start off as none. Great. So we have a result. We just don't have a way of actually changing that result, right? Like we still have to find out who the winner is. Okay. So we're lucky that, normally you could make some complicated, algorithm to like check all the things or whatever. We're lucky tic-tac-toe only has so many ways you can win. So I'm going to go to source, press new file, and we're going to make something called patterns. And we're just going to hard code all the patterns because there's not very many of them, right? And then we're going to compare our board with those patterns. This is something that, yeah, I don't blame you guys if you don't want to type it. That's completely fine. But we're going to export. Always got to remember to export. I always forget. Make patterns. This is patterns is going to be a multi-dimensional array, right? So, I mean, what are the winning combinations here? If the indexes are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? I mean, it's going to be horizontal, right? Oh, sorry, this is a brace. This needs to be a square bracket because we have an array. The horizontal of 0, 1, 2, the horizontal of 3, 4, 5, because it starts at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's just going to go horizontal like that. So 6, 7, 8. Then we got to go vertical, right? So 0, 3, 6, 1, 4, 7. And then 2, 5, 8. And then the only other two are the diagonals, which are 0, 4, 8, and 2, 4, 6. Great. So we have patterns now, but we want to actually use that. So we can't forget, like I forgot with the squares, we got to import it if we want to use it, right? So we're going to say import patterns from, and it's in the same directory as everything else. We just say /patterns. There you go. So now we can use that. Probably the most copy and paste of patterns into the Zoom chat. Yes, I can definitely do that to save you guys the trouble. There you go. Oh, look, it's even formatted properly. Look at that. Completely save you guys the effort. And we have 10 minutes. I can, how about this, to save you guys, for those that are still coding along with me, to save you guys the trouble of typing all this out, I will just give you guys the check victory function to see if somebody wins, and then I'll just talk through it. That sound good? Let me see if this formats properly in Zoom. That would be crazy. Oh my gosh, it kind of did. That's amazing. Okay, so now we need a function to actually check for a victory. I want to get this done in time so you guys can have a functioning tic-tac-toe. So let's actually check for victory, right? Well, actually, we're going to use the function that I gave, and at the end, if we have time, I'll talk about it. But this is just checking for a winner, and it's just comparing that and comparing that up with the patterns array that we have, right? Cool. This function is in the Zoom chat for those that are still following along. Okay, so great. We have this winner function, and whenever we find a winner, and it properly finds a winner, it sets the new result to the winning player and saying the state of the game is it's won. Well, in order to simplify this, what we can do is just say, okay, well, every single time there's a change in the result state variable that we declared up here, then we can stop the game, say who won, and restart it. And a simple way to do that is with a use effect, right? It happens every single time there's a change in what we specify. But it also happens on the first render. So we have to be careful of that. So we say if result.state is not equal to none, because it would be none on the first render, we want to alert, which is just going to stop the game and say, game finished. You can type whatever you want here, right? Game finished. The winning player is, let's do a little embedding here, result.winner, right? So cool. It's saying, okay, well, whenever someone finds a winner, that changes result. And then this happens whenever result changes. Actually, we got to specify that down here, but this happens whenever result changes, right? And if the result.state is not equal to none, then it'll alert and say, stop, the game's done, right? So let's try it, right? Let's see if we can get a win here. So I'm gonna beat myself. Uh-oh, why is it not happening? Well, we're not actually calling check victory, right? But now we got to figure out, okay, well, when do we want to call check victory? Well, every single time a move has been made, I feel like we should probably check if somebody has won, right? I think that makes logical sense. And we already have a use effect that happens every single time there's a change in the board. So why don't we just tack it onto there, right? I don't see why not. It won't falsely detect a winner in the first render, so there's nothing to worry about. So let's try it. Let's try and get a win for the X's. Oh, look at that. It alerts you. It says game finish, winning player is X. Great. Let's try it with O's. Look at that, winning player O. So we are now properly stopping the game whenever somebody wins, right? Thanks to the lovely assist of this check victory function, which I can explain at the end if we have time. It's really not complicated. It's just saving y'all the effort of trying to think through this. Okay, well, this is this is working tic tac toe. We just need to figure out if there's a tie, and we should restart the game if somebody has won it or it's been tied. And other than that, it's completely functional tic tac toe, right? Okay, well, I think we should check for a tie. The logic for this also is really simple. I mean, if you weren't in a workshop environment listening to someone talk, I'm sure you could easily think of it yourself too. Let's just make a function, check for tie. We're going to run it at the same time we run check for victory. So let's call it like check if tie. Does not need any arguments. So no parameters. And we're going to say, okay, let's have like a Boolean flag. I mean, there's not really Boolean in JavaScript, but I just said Boolean, didn't I? Filled. I'm going to call it filled. And let's just default it to true. And if we find a square that is not filled, we will say it's not true anymore. So like kind of innocent until proven guilty, right? So let filled equal true. Okay. Let's cycle through the whole thing using our for each square. We want the square value when we're there. What we want to do on every single thing is check if square, this value at the square is equal to nothing, then filled is no longer true, right? Go down here after it's cycled through everything, and if it's found a non-filled square, then it says, okay, well, it's not filled anymore. But if it's still filled, that means we have a tie, right? So set result, winner, nobody, you guys stink. And then states, let's just say like, I'm still in quotes on state tie. If we just call that at the same time we're checking for a victory, check if tie. Now we should get whenever we get a tie, it should stop the game, right? So let's try and get a tie. Let's see if I can actually get a tie. Getting a tie is kind of hard sometimes. Okay, wait. Let's see if I can do this. Nice. See, look, game finished, winning player, nobody. You guys stink, right? So, I mean, that's completely working tic-tac-toe. It detects ties, detects wins. Anything beyond this point would just be quality of life. I mean, like, it's super easy to continue to improve on, right? Like, if we wanted to say, okay, well, once the game is done, then let's just restart it. We can make a restart game function, right? Really easily, doesn't take any arguments. It's just resetting the board back to its initial state, which is 9 empty strings. Where did it go? Down here. Just reset it back to its initial state. Set the player back to the initial player, which is O, because it gets changed on the render. And then whenever we alert the game is over, we can also just restart game like that. And now you have fully functional tic-tac-toe. Every single time you get a win, it tells you who wins, and then it restarts it for you. So yeah, that's tic-tac-toe. I understand that in this format, it can be kind of hard to follow. I hope that just from, if you got lost just sitting here and watching me work through it all and kind of talk through the logic behind it, I hope you could get something out of that. If you want to go back and watch the video where you can kind of pause it and you can slow it down if I'm going too quick, I think that would be really helpful. I think as long as you guys understand something about these hooks that you didn't before, mostly the importance of use state and how useful it is, see how many times we used it, and use effect, which we also used twice. So yeah, I hope you guys are able to get something out of this. I'm going to send the feedback form and also the link to the repository if you guys want the finished code for this. Yeah, just in the link right there. So if you guys want the finished code for this tic-tac-toe, you want to look at it, you want to modify it, do whatever you want with it, that's completely fine. Yeah, so that's there. I don't know, let me see if I can find the link for the feedback form, because I'm supposed to give that to you guys. Just give me like 1 second. You can look through the repository if you want. You can scroll through all my projects, my school assignments and such. Okay, let's see. Okay, I found it. Awesome. So fill this out and it'll give you, what do they call them? Swag points and stuff. Also, it'll help me understand how to better convey this sort of information. You put the second use effect under the first one. Do you make a use state for if you want to make a counter for the winner? Yes, that's actually a great point. The use effect, it doesn't matter the order you put these because they're happening at different times, right? This use effect it's only doing this on the first render and whenever there's a change in the board, because we specified that. This use effect is on the first render and whenever there's a change in the result. So I mean, it doesn't matter where we put them. Like I could cut this and put this up here and save it, and it's going to be the same thing, right? Yes, I mean, it still works because it's responding to different things. And then if you can make a use state, if you want to make a counter, yeah, you absolutely could. Yeah, I mean, you could just, whenever you find like a win, you could just, if you have like, I don't know, two different, or a use state that's like an object for like X player and O player, you could do that. And then, you know, whenever you are stopping and resetting the game for a win, you just add to it. Yeah, so if you guys have any questions, yeah, thank you, Serena. If you guys have any questions, if there's any part that was specifically like confusing, or if you're curious about a certain part, I think I'll stick around for a couple minutes if anybody is curious, but just make sure you fill out that feedback form so you can you can get your shirts and stuff. Yeah, thank you guys for taking the time and listening. Sorry if I went quick. I know it was pretty fast, but I hope you guys got something out of it. All right, yeah, I'll stick around for a couple minutes.